Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-host Wilfred Riley. Joining us to kind of bring the political perspective here is Christy Kelly. And our guest this week is AJ Rice. He is the CEO of Publius PR and author of The Walking Dead, How Society's Vogue Virus Destroys Our Culture. Here's the book, but there's many behind you. AJ, welcome to the show.
Great to be here, guys. Big fan of everybody here. Let's have some fun.
All right, so we got a lot to cover, but he shoots it off. So I'm sure we're going to go through knock some of these things down. I guess I want to start, I guess kind of where I tend not to say this show goes, but it's not that we're afraid to talk about it. We're going to talk a little politics, kind of get your DC insights as a PR guy. And I know Will and I've lost this debate, but we've had several debates with different guests about whether the podcast is political. Obviously the culture kind of coincides so often that they cover each other and you kind of get lost in it. But I don't think we directly talk about it that often, but I guess we will today. But I want to start briefly with the book as to, it's more of obviously a collection of some of your works, but why the Walking Dead name and what was the point of putting this together?
Well, most of it was written during COVID. So what I was watching was, even though the virus had escaped the lab, apparently, or Dr. Fauci's underwear drawer, that there was a true virus that, and everyone on this show has talked about it. There was a true virus that was making its way through the culture, even before, the lockdowns and before, the summer of Floyd. I mean, obviously, and you guys know this, social justice warriors are out there. I came from the humanities department. So I was a student in the late 90s, early 2000s in some of the Philadelphia madrasas of wokeism. I've always been familiar. I was in school when 9/11 happened, when Bush invaded Iraq. So, it's interesting to see how some of my own opinions have evolved since then. I would say that with the Me Too movement and some of what was going on with, on college campuses and during the lockdown with what was going on in some of these public schools, I was taking note that there was another virus afoot. And look, I'm in the game to have fun, right? I'm out here to be the Irish Charles Krauthammer, right? So I'm always looking to hang a joke on someone. Most days, I believe mockery is more important than facts. Although I do believe, like Limbaugh used to say, using irreverent humor to illustrate truth is the way to go. So I'm a big fan of the culture. I love the culture. I absorb all kinds of film and music and serialized drama, TV shows. So obviously The Walking Dead, which finally ended, I think it began when I was 5, and now I'm in my 40s now. It finally came to an end, although I see that they're spinning it off. I wanted to have some fun with zombie imagery, so the George Romero and the Walking Dead imagery. But long before Elon was calling wokeism the woke mind virus, I was making the case in columns and with the PR firm and on the interviews that I was doing, prior to 2022, that, we were basically tangling with a new version of cultural Marxism. I've seen a lot of woke books come out since then. I saw some that predated mine. Not a lot, but it was there. There is a through line. And so some of what we're fighting here with wokeism is not new. The term may be fashionable, although, maybe the term has jumped the shark at this point. But with cultural Marxism, going back 100 years, and coming all the way forward. So, the progressive movement, Sanger and Wilson, and the fun with eugenics prior to World War I, come all the way forward. If you delve into the philosopher Antonio Gramsci, there was, I think, a methodology afoot that, was, we're not going to get a workers' revolt here. Mainly because the United States had a middle class and a nuclear family, and we weren't going to get a head chopping situation like we did with the Romanovs. So we weren't going to be able to just get plumbers and bricklayers and longshoremen to overthrow the government. It wasn't going to happen for various reasons. So instead, we're going to do something else, like termites. We're going to burrow in. We're going to do the long march. And, the silent picture industry, Broadway, the newspaper business, early radio, Democrat Party, public sector unions, the academy. And here we are, 100 years later. We call these people woke. I've tried to sort of create this unified theory of wokeness, but it's such a target-rich environment, and it's like nailing Jello to the wall. The flavors of wokeism is like the 31 flavors of Baskin and Robbins, and they keep adding them. So, like, from my perspective, every day there's some new version of this. But at the end of the day, it is cultural Marxism. They do think that they can capture us through the culture. So what a great totalitarian dress rehearsal than the lockdowns of COVID, right? So we got the Me Too movement telling the youth that we're all predators and that, toxic masculinity has got to go, and the patriarchy is over, and, don't ask Sally to the dance. Don't you dare say that someone looks good in line at Starbucks. I'm a millennial. So, I remember VCRs and pagers. So, when it comes to some of this, you're talking about Gen Z. I'm an old millennial, a geriatric millennial, but I could call myself Gandalf the millennial sometimes. And I would just say that the one difference between millennials and Gen Z, and one of the reasons they're less enticed by wokeism, is that regardless of how stupid it was, and in some cases, taking pictures of your food is stupid, millennials seem to be obsessed with purpose. Now, it might have been a dopey purpose, but we remember a time before the internet, most of us, at least the Reagan and Bush Senior babies, and, we are not willing to just sit in a cubicle forever. We'll go back to school. We'll join the military. We'll go take people on, backpack tours through Machu Picchu. We're not just going to sit there and be told what to do, right? Millennials use social media for a lot of e-commerce. We weren't sort of gamers and users the way Gen Z has become. So when I explain some of this, and The Woking Dead being basically a fun way to describe cultural Marxism, and whose brains are being eaten when you have the millennials and Gen Z in particular. Millennials obsessed with purpose. Gen Z obsessed with what? Identity. They're obsessed with identity. And the irony, of course, is that they don't really have one, right? Like, I used to joke, I used to be the executive producer of the Laura Ingraham show in another life. And Laura and I, 15 years ago, we used to joke about Tommy has two mommies. But now, Tommy don't just have two mommies. Tommy's got two mommies, two daddies. Tommy is Tommy on Wednesday and Sally on Thursday. So when you add all this up, the Me Too movement tells Gen Z, you might be a predator. The summer of Floyd happens, being fueled by, as you guys know, 1619, the SJWs, and so on. So now we're all racist. Now, we're not going to stop with the Confederate generals. We're coming for the Union generals too, and we're coming for Columbus and Thatcher and, Lincoln. And then obviously you've got the trans mafia. And these three groups, at least with Gen Z, have become a peer contagion, I believe. And we're captured. We're captured. Now, if you're Gen X, if you're a boomer, you're probably not captured. Gen X has its own problems. like the Breakfast Club and the alienation culture, the Fight Club, Tyler Durden's speech about no great war, no great depression, our great war is a spiritual war, our great depression is our lives. Gen X's biggest problem is that their children are Gen Z, right? So most millennials have boomer parents, for good or ill. Most of us do. Most of us do. So there are some cultural through lines here with wokeism and with these groups of kids going through maturation, processes and trying to go out into the world and trying to figure out, can I get a mortgage? Oh, look at these freaking interest rates. Can I pay off these student loans? Maybe I shouldn't major in, underwater lesbian basket weaving or the isms. We were talking, Will, before you got here about how these schools, some of them, the faculty lounge fascistas and these different madrasas out there from the humanities department. And who's running the humanities departments? Now, I came from the humanities department. I was at least undergrad. I was an English literature major. My biggest debates were about, I guess, racial power, stuff that you guys have dealt with, racial power and how, black people can't be racist to whites because the whites have all the power. I mean, we were doing a little bit of that when Bush was invading Iraq. But what goes on now is unbelievable. So I wrote the book to be fun and to be funny. I'm a comedy guy. You can tell that if you go through the book. The definition of comedy is what? Tragedy plus time, or the ability to transform horror into humor. So with the book, there's a bunch of vignettes. I broke it down into 10 sections. Most of them haven't reached an expiration date. There is some stuff in there that was written prior to, 2022 when the book came out that I look at and I'm like, wow, I could do an addendum there, which I've done in another book, which will come out in September. So look, I try to have fun with this stuff, guys. I know plenty of people can come in here and give you Aristotelian arguments. I care more about Richard Pryor and George Carlin and Ricky Gervais and Chappelle than I do, whether Socrates was a real person, whether Plato invented him as a composite, or whether Aristotle and Plato had a debate about throwing all the philosophers out of the Republic. So look, those are fun things. As an English literature major, I was forced to read everything, but I try to at least have some trickle down comedy. And when I talk to groups, and if I get brought in and talk to millennials or Gen Zers, one of my mentors was Andrew Breitbart, and what I can say is, he was always telling me no one gives a crap who's running for dog catcher in Des Moines. They care about their culture. And when it comes to wokeism and schools, whether it's college or kindergarten, right? Because now we got trickle down wokeism. They care whether this stuff follows you home. So I guess the one thing that wokeism gave us was they sent all the kids home. The parents are home. The parents are home from work and they're opening the textbook, and they find that Thomas Jefferson was, and his brother and Sally Hemings and the whole gang, that was the most important thing with Thomas Jefferson, not anything else he did. You might have heard of, right? Not, Louisiana Purchase, not the Declaration, not the third president, not UVA's creation, none of it. So, I think I try to goof on what we do just because I think, if we're going to go to the gallows, we might have some humor on our way there.
And that was AJ being short, ladies and gentlemen. Short AJ.
Well,
I just wanted to see how long you were going to go. I was just going to say, let's see when he runs out of gas. I don't think he was going to. Will, he made a lot of points there, of course, but if I could say anything that he may not have gotten to, not that he missed it, but he would have gotten to it at some point. But he made one good point about a lot of this stuff not being new. There was a through line, and he went back 100 years. But like we often say here, there's always been radicals and there've always been extremists. There's a difference in how society is reacting to them today as opposed to 40 or 50 years ago. Can you speak a bit to that? Like why people don't take the Will Riley approach and just say, this is stupid. No.
Right. Well, here's the thing, and I talk about this sometimes
I
as a
was talking to Wilfred Riley.
Oh, I thought you were
okay?
asking me. Okay. Go ahead, Will. Alley-oop, brother.
So I was muted there for a second. First of all, looking at Christy, I could tell she thinks that Charles, that you and I are prone talking about the same length from that intro. We could each one whole boxing round. But I mean, anyway, though, so I think that there's actually a very important point here. So James Lindsay, who I think all four met and chopped it up with at events, will say the topic doesn't matter. What matters is the revolution when he's talking about these kind of warmed over commies. And it took me a while to warm up to that, but I think it's basically true. Because when you ask, like, why would someone wear a shirt that says, like, fat feminist lesbians for Palestine, which we saw at a march recently? Like, what the hell do those things have to do with each other? What does feminism have to do with homosexuality? What does that have to do with Palestine? The answer is that all of them are tied together in a coalition which sees, like, the man in a blue suit, especially if he's white, as the enemy. That is the answer. It's the idea of a coalition of the fringes against the center. To quote actually a Nigerian businessman and writer, Chiuna Akabe. So there's a really cogent idea of communism as the revolution of the oppressed, the lumpen proletariat, the outcast, the runaway, the deserting soldier. I mean, they've used all these terms for a while against kind of normal people. So the basic idea that I once defined wokeness as having kind of three components, and I'll try to keep this as brief as possible. But like one is the idea that every system is set up to oppress somebody, usually groups of people. So in communism, it was everybody who's not a member of the ownership caste, right? Critical race theory is like a slightly lower IQ ripoff of that. So it's basically just non-white people. You just take the communist framework straight up and you replace the rich man with the white man. Fourth wave feminism, it's the same thing. You replace the rich man with the man. So every institution in society is just set up to benefit men. My favorite example of this is that marriage is a trap designed to get men as much sex as possible from women. I believe that's de Beauvoir. But like they say this and they say it with their full chest, no longer bound by the oppression of a bra. Like every system is set up to hold back women. It's not that, Eleanor de Aquitaine and, female and male leaders sat down together. These are the rules of chivalry. No, structured by men to hold down women. And it goes on and on, fat studies, so on. And the second point is that any evidence of disparities in group performance is evidence of this intentional discrimination. So if we see that blacks and Hispanics, especially natives now, do worse on standardized board tests than whites, well, that's evidence that standardized board testing is an oppressive system. Asians and Indians and Jews and Nigerians, well, we just don't talk about them or they're white. And third, the solution that we need to this is any system that produces disparities needs to be broken. We need a revolution. We need equity. So there's a through line that goes through all these radicals. At root, they all want the same thing, and they apply this one paradigm. They actually call it a science, the dialectic to everything. So like the solution in Palestine would be the solution in Northern Ireland would be the solution in Georgia, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, why are we listening to them more now? I can say that in one sentence because now they're mainstream. Like for a long time, these people were just out there on the fringes. Like when I was in college, and I mean, I crossed the 40 line. I'm really open about it. These people were outside smoking their clove cigarettes. You might come down from, the gym or Greek Row for those guys that went that way or whatever. You might occasionally ask one for a date, depending on your hygiene standards. It was a thing. They were the other half of the campus. They were sometimes your casual buddies. But it was a very niche sort of thing. I mean, if I were thinking of fields where that would be concentrated, anthropology, Black studies. I mean, today, this is the absolute mainstream. And it really surprised me. I mean, when I came back to the campus, even at a Southern school, very respectable, solid college, a fair amount of it, obviously I like where I work. But if you go up to Harvard, Yale, I mean, this is now considered to be the academic mainstream. Not because it's been vindicated by real research or something like that. I mean, we're now seeing a great deal of it turn out to be just plagiarized nonsense as Chris Rufo and other people go to work. But just because of that march through the institutions over the years, academia leans about 93% to the left. You got journalism about 85, 90% to the left. So, I mean, I think that's why we're getting so used to hearing this, because they really kind of sneakily got in there in the humanities and so on and took over. And now we need to take some of that back, not with right-wing nonsense, but just with kind of down the middle reality to some extent. Like, I obviously lean to the right, but we're just hearing a bunch of nonsense because the nonsense makers are in charge.
Well,
That
Christy,
feels like my cue.
but
Can I
Christy, yeah,
piggyback on that?
yeah,
Christy.
but what I want to ask you a question though. You
Now
can
10
feel
minutes from Charles.
you can
But no,
feel
like,
free to run with it for 15 minutes and say what and say what else you want to say. But I got to ask you a question because these all tie together. So he answered
Okay.
the one question, which leads to that there's got to be some level of pushback. But you ran for statewide office recently. I have a feeling, as the politics and the culture, we all agree that you can't that they're tethered together. But I'm not sure that the people in power, the ones who don't think that way, as Will was saying, but the people in power in opposition truly understand it to the level that the four of us or Lindsay or Chris Rufo understands it. So because they don't really understand it, are they really doing a good enough job of pushing back against it?
Well, let me go where I was going to go and let me see if that answers your question. And if it doesn't, I can more directly address it or circle back. So Charles and Will are conservative, but not necessarily.
Here we go.
Or Republican. I am America First, MAGA, Arizona, more extreme Republican. AJ is laughing already.
That sounded like a put down, AJ. So Charles and Will are stupid.
We honestly believe if we say where all this wokeism is headed, we believe it's headed towards the collapse of America. And we believe it is dire. I mean, we believe that we're on the brink of losing our country and that we are really fighting a battle against, evil. And when you talk about what is our biggest problem, that really resonated with me because I am a mom of, those young kids that we are trying to save. And I think conservatives do see it as our number one mission is to stop this evil, and it is evil. It's just not progressivism, right? Because when we were younger, it was, okay, then it wasn't blue hair, then it maybe have been, more, retro clothes or whatever, but those people were just liberal. Now it is a little bit more insidious, I think. And I think does that kind of answer your question, Charles? I think the difference is when we say, where is it heading? I think maybe we don't think it's going to fizzle out. Yes, it is mainstream. Yes, it is taking over, but it's more insidious. If we keep letting it go, it will become the destruction of America.
Well, I agree with that, but no, my question was slightly different. My question is, if it's as bad as we are all saying it is, and there must be some voice out there screaming, some fighter out there pushing back against it, some, alternative to be offered to people who are paying attention. Since you brought it up and you beating us up for not being, in the GOP on the team, I think there's some lacking in the quality of the pushback that is needed, or what we have represented in the alternative of the two parties. If we're saying everybody's not necessarily in that party, but if we're saying that the Democrats are selling us this thing that we're saying is bad, I don't think the Republicans are fighting the same fight. On average, some are, of course. I think some of them are still a Republican from 20 to 25 years ago. I'm trying to win an election. I don't agree with them, but we can fix it legislatively. They don't think that it's some sinister strain. They don't think that they're trying to ruin the country, or they certainly don't act like they think that. That's what I
think I definitely think that you have a point there, right? So I definitely try to focus more on local politics, right? Because all politics is local. So if you want to deal with all of Congress, there's still a hot mess. But if you talk about like your local politicians and what are they doing, I think a lot of them are nailing down on culture, right? I think a lot of them are nailing down on how can we change the culture. A lot of them are saying, hey, let's get back to traditional households. We heard that with Vivek, right? Let's get back to, marriage, getting married young, procreating, having the, traditional family. You hear that a lot, even like the whole trad wife thing, right? Within right-wing culture. you hear it as a pushback to let's get back to traditional marriage.
I'm gonna come back to you briefly, AJ, but maybe that's part of the problem. It is better than before when they didn't have a clue. So it is better that they're talking about the culture now, but it's all reactionary, like you just said. It's like it's like the culture warriors say or do something, and then they react to it. So it may be genuine, but to the kind of lazy, non-tuned in listener and viewer, it just sounds like you're complaining about something that this culture is doing, as opposed to leading, creating your own culture that's not counterculture. Just this is what America was built on, what it should be, what I expect to be, what we want. This is what we all want. Come on, you Uber driver, you restaurant manager, you regular, American working class and middle class person. You want the same things we want. They're not really talking to them, and the left isn't talking to them either, but they don't have to because they have all the levers of control. So that may be part of the problem.
No, we're going to agree today, Charles, huh?
Wow.
Because we conservatives still have not, we have not found a way to be regular people, right? And reach the middle. We just haven't. We're kind of on our own island. And yeah, we are very reactionary and still very condescending to those that aren't, born with a conservative spoon in their mouth.
Well, not really as condescending as, I don't know, hypothetically being a sitting U.S. state governor saying Black people don't know what computers are. I mean, we're not that out of touch. I mean, not that anybody's actually said that, but, hypothetically, if someone were to say that, most people would view that as out of touch. AJ, let's look at this through a political lens briefly, from both sides in a sense. So the left, obviously, is now in the driver's seat of the culture for whatever reason. However they got there, they are. And we can talk all day about the most extreme versions, the people out there with the shirt that Will was talking about, the activists or the kindies and all that. We talk about them ad nauseum. But what I'm finding, in these meetings on the school council and all this other thing, is that the bigger problem and the harder sell is, it's hard getting to regular people because they're not going to these events, they're not watching Fox News, they're not paying attention. But beyond that, you have people like, and I'll use one name. I've been talking to him. Hopefully he comes on, he doesn't chicken out, because I think it'll be a great conversation. Chancellor Banks. So he runs the school in New York. So most of the people on the conservative side would just look at him and just blindly label, stamp him as leftist as everyone else, say he's bad, say all this other kind of thing, right? But what's unique about him is that he's one of those people. So I wouldn't put him in the bucket of a, Kendi or Nicole Hannah-Jones or the others who are trying to push this leftist narrative. He was just speaking to Congress about the anti-Semitism in the schools. I believe that he really means that, it's bad. Like they ask him, is this anti-Semitism? Well, the left would say, well, it depends on what you mean by it. He was like, yes, it is. Right. And I think it's bad. That is not the problem I have with Banks. The problem with people like him, I'm using him as an example, is that many of them truly notice some of this stuff. They'll say that we can't attack the right. They'll say that you can't just, ostracize someone because they think differently from you. However, they don't realize, because they say the right things, that the things that they support, the curriculum they write, the people that the legislation that they push, and the things that they do in practice, they have, just like I say, the right is kind of blind, has a blind spot to some of these things. They don't see that their actions, as you talked about that slow walk over the past 100 years, their actions got us here. So I want to have him on so I can ask him if he understands that as much as he hates racism, anti-Semitism, bullying, and everything else that's bad is happening in school, allowing your school to focus on a curriculum that's driven solely by highlighting how different students are, right? We want them to be the same and treat everyone the same. But in order to teach children, young children, K through third grade, let's say, that they should treat everyone the same, we should do that by dissecting the food, right? And saying that they're all different. Look at his skin is different. Look at that thing he wears on his head. Look at the eyeliner that one wears. Look at the way that one dresses. Let's look around the room and look at how different we are. And then they think that somehow that's going to make you 4 years down the road get along. No, it's going to make me realize a difference that I wasn't paying attention to before. So that's what I think is probably the biggest problem. It's not the extreme left. I do have a problem that we're paying attention to them, like Will said, but that's a problem. But Will will tell you, he talks to a lot of blue collar people like I do, and they don't buy this stuff. The problem is the people who are saying the right things, but their actions are perpetuating it. So talk a bit about your views in, as in what you see and how you see the problem is as it relates to people who fit that mold. I think it's more of them than it is that extreme left.
If I could jump in really briefly there, actually, as someone who works in ed, that's a big problem in education in general. Like going through these really detailed kind of curricula that focus on shit that no normal person really thinks about at that age level to kind of like warn against it. Like sex education, I think, is the classic example of this, like where you spend a week discussing anal sex. I mean, or whatever the topic might be. I mean, but it goes beyond that. Like we did death education in Kentucky. Like, have you ever considered cutting yourself with a knife? And
I haven't, but now I do.
Yeah, but I mean, like the large majority of high school junior girls probably don't spend that much time sitting around thinking about anal sex. Like the large majority of guys probably don't spend that much time wondering where their dad's shotgun's located. Like if you take a book home and think about your darkest fantasies for a week, even if the ending of the book is don't do this, that's almost certainly going to increase what you call rates of incidents. So it's the same thing with this race stuff, and it's all so bad and crudely done. Like one of the scenarios that I saw in the race education curricula was like write down all the racial stereotypes you can think of for blacks. Then it was like write down all the racial stereotypes you can think of for whites. And like in Kentucky, it's usually a mix of blacks and whites. And I can imagine kids in mixed groups doing this. Like, yeah, you guys never pass the ball. Yeah, well, you don't have dads. Well, let me tell you, all you guys are on meth. Like and they would probably even be having fun with it. But like, you can't, your job's not to give people better schoolyard insults. There's no point to this exercise ever. What's 10 inches long and white? Like, shut up.
Wasn't there a TV show literally about that? The people were complaining on Netflix about trying to get a show canceled because it was about, I never watched the show. It was a tween kind of show, but I think it was it 13 Reasons Why? It was about suicide or whatever. And they were thinking that, they was going, people were like, no, it's going to encourage kids to do it. That's literally the same thing they're doing with everything else in schools.
It was 13 Reasons Why, but no, that's exactly what they're doing. Like you'll give people, and this is Tom Sowell talking about the 1980s. I'm not saying we're doing this as a curriculum in Kentucky right now or anything like that, but like a death education course would literally be something like, okay, you're in a scenario where your beloved grandmother has just died. Why shouldn't you kill yourself? And I mean, like most people, like I don't, again, like we've all made fun of each other for like long talking and stuff, but like this is why therapy doesn't work. Like everyone has painful experiences in their life. Like the percentage of people that have been physically, let's just limit it to that, assaulted in their life is like 90 across men and women. If you go into a professional's office and start describing it, like, yeah, then he hit me in the head with a board, it was painful, a permanent scar. I actually have a permanent scar in the back of my head where someone hit me with a champagne bottle. Interesting story. But like the more often you recall these kind of incidents and you bring them up and you discuss them, the more likely you are to feel negative, lingering trauma because of that. We've known this about soldiers for 100 years, literally since World War I, shell shock, And I don't imagine that's less true for anybody else than it is for trained fighting men. So anyway, a lot of this stuff goes on, and the effect is not good. I can't imagine it ever is.
You want to add anything, AJ?
Yeah, I mean, look, we're being trained to search for our flavor of victimhood, right? This was done to me, and then this micro event takes place, but I'm going to find a macro reason to be part of some gigantic, grievance group, right? I mean, that in and of itself is some of the process that's going on here. And we'll outline some of how that we get there, earlier. When you're talking about authoritarians, and you're talking about who they're willing to hold their nose for and join forces with. I tell people all the time, look, authoritarians will all get in the rowboat together. They will. Hitler, I don't think, thought Mussolini was white, even though he was Italian. And the most racist regime in the 20th century was willing to do a deal with Asian people to join forces, which is why, when the October 7th attack in Israel happens, and all of a sudden, these Jewish secular comedians Sarah Silverman, Michael Rappaport, Amy Schumer, who were all sort of Bernie Sanders, Trump hating, socialists, national socialists. They're shocked to find out that all their national socialists, Medea Benjamin, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders buddies, are cheering it on. They're shocked. Chuck Schumer's chubby niece was shocked to find out that all these people that they were running around with, including Susan Sarandon, I guess, that they were all for, going on a Jew hunt. So, that's the thing is that you can get a lot of these people to sort of flock together. But one of the, and so let me just make that point. But one of the things that all of you have said is the question is, how many of these people are there really? I tell people most of politics takes place between the 40-yard lines. People rarely score. You shuffle this way, we shuffle that way. Trump scores, Obama scores, Reagan scores, but mostly, and the system was set up that way. So then on the fringes, what used to be alternative lifestyles, what used to be, like you were talking about earlier, the people that we kind of goofed on, right? And in the old days, most of these people were defined by the music they listened to, but no longer. Gen Z's not listening to music. They're gaming and they're doing the TikTok thing, among other things. So they're not like, white kids in the suburbs listening to Wu-Tang or steampunk or, the dead Kennedy people or the goth people. But, we all knew them, the grunge kids, Nirvana and Pearl Jam. We used to, and even before that, Gen X and the boomers, they all had their Motown and Philly soul and so on. But they're not breaking themselves down that way anymore. And in fact, much art is not being absorbed at all. But I don't think there are as many of these people as the media wants us to believe. I mean, we know there's not that many trans people, right? We're saying the Black national anthem at NFL games, and I guess that's for what, 13% of the population. Hispanic, they're 17. I mean, look, they've turned us into a Benetton ad where they're putting us in their little jars, their little identity jars, right? And they're giving us our tasks. But I think with what has gone on with wokeism and all its flavors, I think the regular folks, and Will was talking about it, the Appalachian people hanging out with these people. That's what I'm talking about. I think the regular people in this country don't want to be told, all black people are this and all white people are that, and Jamestown is where the country was founded. It was not in Philadelphia, and all this other stuff. They don't want to hear it. They're dealing with inflation and gas prices and all and interest rates through the roof, and college loans and so on. Crappy public schools, and now you're going to load all this stuff on them, which is why, and I'll wrap it up here, which is why I think there is a true insurrection out there, and it's not the one that Liz Cheney and Crying Adam were looking for. It's an insurrection of parents taking back their communities, right? Taking back their communities. I mean, look, Reagan used to say, "Don't look to Washington to save you." Like, Speaker Johnson and McCarthy and Schumer and McConnell, they're not coming to save you, right? So you got to do it locally. And that's why I think you are seeing some school boards flip. Miami-Dade County last year. And I think if you take it back that way, I'm not far from Loudoun County here in Northern Virginia. Look, go into these things. I tell people, go in, wear a GoPro camera, go in and mix it up with them. Yeah, Merrick Garland may say that you're more dangerous than ISIS, but you've got to go do that and expose them, and bring that content to journalists you can trust or shows like this, and we'll put it online. Give it to Tucker, give it to Hannity, give it to Joe Rogan, give it to Matt Walsh, whoever. And I think you can fight back that way, because I don't want to believe that the cultural Marxists, that there is that many of these people. Right. I think they're loud and obnoxious and fun to goof on. But, you know, how many members of Queers for Palestine are there really?
2.
Right?
Probably whoever you saw the t-shirt, that's the total.
Right. I mean,
I got another question to ask you, but I got to make one correction because we
Yeah.
have to have our facts straight. You mentioned something about Hitler being a racist, but being willing to work with Asians. I assume you meant the Japanese, and they're white adjacent.
Well, right, exactly. And we were talking about that a little bit ago, right? And Will was talking about how different groups do well in different things, and you know,
become white.
Right. Yes. Well, right, exactly. And you know, the sequel to The Walking Dead, I spent half the book on white adjacent. It's the funniest thing I've ever heard. It's, you know, because I represent Kenny Shu and some of the Asians who were involved.
Oh, you can't see it. Let me see if I can turn it down.
Involved in the Harvard case, right? They're my clients. But Asians are white adjacent. Hispanics are now white. I mean, the New York Magazine wrote a piece called "The Rise of the Hispanic White Supremacists."
Right.
I mean, just give it time. Just give it time. You will eventually be labeled white adjacent. But here's the funniest thing about that, and I'll keep it at this: it's not black people calling these brown. In most cases, it's not black people calling these brown people or yellow people or purple people white adjacent. It's usually white libs, which are the only people I've ever seen celebrate Kwanzaa, is white liberals. And they are the ones, I call them the pumpkin spice mafia, living in the richest, whitest neighborhoods in the United States with their Black Lives Matter flag, virtue signaling themselves to death, flapping in the wind. Love is love, you know, hug Hamas, in this house, we vaccinate newborns, you know, with the signs. They got their pumpkin spice their pumpkin spice latte, their Pelotons, their Audis, and they're all going to tell us who's white adjacent and who isn't.
Well, they would know best because they're white, so they would know. Hey, AJ, can you answer this question for me? How did we get the country moved so far left when we elected a moderate as president?
Oh, what do you mean? You're talking about Uncle Cracker?
No,
Joey? Joey, who are you talking about? Joey from Scranton?
Joe Biden is a moderate.
Mr. Malarkey?
Maybe even center right, even. He might even be center right. Old white guy.
Well, the problem is that he's been dead for 4 years, so the real question is who's the guy running the Twitter accounts and all that?
Yes, he's the leader of the Walking Dead. He's a reanimated president, right? He's the reanimated corpse president.
That's pretty funny.
And look, he's like Ron Burgundy. You can put whatever you want in front of him, and he'll sign it. Like every left-handed golfer must be executed. Oh, there goes Phil Mickelson, right? Like whatever you put in front of him, he will read or sign. So in a lot of ways, the deep state and, you know, the Walking Dead and the people that, you know, the squad and whoever else, he's their dream president because he's just this potpourri of nonsense, woke nonsense, or he'll sign whatever you want. So you can get whatever you want from him because he's just, you know, a cadaver. And he'll give you all your woke hopes and dreams. I mean, he will make them all possible, which is why they're going to do everything they can, hook him up to the Pentagon's mainframe with a bunch of jumper cables to keep him there, because they can speed up this process. They could speed it up because they wanted, as you guys know, the plan was 8 years of Obama and 8 years of Hillary. And, you know, Trumpzilla came along and stopped that for a short period of time. He caught them napping. He caught them playing defense on their heels, right? And they corrected that 4 years later. They made sure that the most uninteresting white dude in America somehow got more votes than Barack Obama. I don't know how it happened. We don't have to go. We're not going to go there today. My books aren't about that, but it is interesting how that happened.
Let me go to Christy. Christy,
don't set me up today, Charles.
I'm just asking questions, lady. You go wherever you want to go. We've been talking a lot about, you know, who's in control of what's going on and all this kind of stuff as we get closer to the end of 24 and maybe predictions and what might happen. Let's go the other way. What do you think, if there are things, because they all have weaknesses, would be the thing that, or the issue that would be the biggest Achilles heel for the Democrats?
The biggest Achilles heel is what we see going on right now.
Which thing? There's a lot going on.
Well, there's one universal thing. I mean, they're losing their base, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are losing that progressive, voice that's now insatiable because they pacified them and they kept pacifying them. So now they're not going to let this, Palestine, versus Israel thing. They're not going to let it go. So I don't know how Joe is going to thread the needle and keep them in line. So what happened was the whole, what do they call the squad, right?
Mm-hmm.
It got oversized. And instead of Joe remembering that his base is moderate, the Pelosi, and when Pelosi stepped down, I think that was a bad sign for Joe. So he went too far to the left.
Mm-hmm.
And so now he has allowed them to take over and actually their voices to be outsized. And then now it's going to be the summer of love all over again. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought, okay, this is going to last a week, maybe two. No, it's just now flaring up. I swore when graduation's over, when school's over, they'll be done. No, now they're just going to start taking to the streets and it's going to be the summer of love all over again. So he's losing control and I don't know how he reins them back in. And it's going to be this mob, the squad against the moderates. And they have such an outsized voice. I don't know how he's going to win.
Will, do you think that the biggest challenge they have, to Christie's point, is balancing their foreign policy issues, all these little fires, not in the traditional way where it's usually whether we go to war or not going to war, that kind of thing, but like she mentioned Israel, like how they do, how do you support? Because what he's saying he's supporting Israel, but then it's actually he's trying to physically give the left what they want. So Israel has a right to defend themselves. Let's not give them weapons. Israel has a right to do this. I'm going to call Netanyahu and tell him not to do this. So he's trying to do both, and it's not making people happy. Well, it was kind of the same on Ukraine, right? And then his actions and reaction to China is the same. So the average people tend to be paying a little less attention to that, but the activists left are paying attention to that. So do you think that would be his biggest difficulty, trying to balance that?
I mean, it's a good question. I mean, first of all, I think I'm kind of with Netanyahu on this one. I mean, Ukraine needs us more, but I mean, Bibi was just like, okay, we're fighting these scruffy savages. I mean, obviously, you don't want mass murder on the ground, but like, we can beat the Hamas military. We don't need the USA for this one. You know, fuck Joe Biden, basically.
Right.
We're gonna go in. We're gonna finish Rafah. We're gonna win the war. They started the war. Classic casus belli. So, I mean, the Israeli army is going to break the last of the Hamas resistance, win the war. Good for them. If you start a war and you fight badly, that's on you. You're going to lose. So, I mean, I think that was the correct decision there. But overall, I mean, let me look at my notes on this because I think Joe Biden thinks this is his biggest problem, but I think this is a social media driven miscalculation. As someone who sometimes does consulting in this field, I think it's a stupid mistake, honestly. He's overweighting Twitter and TikTok. He's not polling real voters, especially white voters, honestly, black business class as well. So, like, Biden himself, I think, is a centrist guy, honestly. Like, he's a political op for me. I'm not that fond of him. But I mean, he really is an 80-year-old guy from Scranton. I mean, he really did write the 94 crime bill. Like, I know Joe Biden doesn't believe this crap he's saying. Like, I saw his face when he said, like, I remember when I was walking with my uncle and I saw two men kissing and he said, love is love. And it's like, no, that didn't happen in an Irish American neighborhood 55 years. I mean, that just did not occur.
Well,
that
now he says, this is the day 233 of me being a girl. Oh, bless your heart.
No, but I mean, like, I grew up in a black, Spanish, Irish neighborhood 35 years ago. I mean, there's no chance that occurred. This was 30 years before that. Come on. Well, I think we're all from ethnic neighborhoods of some kind or another. But like, so Joe Biden himself, yes, is a center left guy. I think the problem is that Joe Biden is obviously, I'm not a doctor, but suffering from some kind of mental decline that we've all seen with the seniors in our lives. He's not making calls. I mean, you'll see Joe Biden on Twitter, quote, writing paragraphs of beautiful texts. I mean, you saw his Holocaust stuff, calling it the Shoah and so on. The question is, who's the person responsible for that? What are their politics? And the answer is left to Chairman Mao. I mean, obviously, the
Right.
driving force in the Democratic Party right now is the squad. I mean, you see the people that are doing the major television appearances. You see what they're talking about. You heard him talk about Israel. I think it's a major problem. We need two competent political parties in this country, even though I want the one I generally vote for to win. But I actually think the Democrats are making a big mistake with this. I mean, if you look at the polling, Israel versus Hamas, when it's phrased as Hamas, it's 79% for Israel. So I think what the Democrats think is that there's this big split. You know, there are some people that oppose, quote unquote, the genocide in Gaza, and then there are some that will never forget 7 October. But the reality is that it's not 50-50, it's 80-20, with half of the 20 wavering. So the problem with a lot of what's going on the left is that they're very heavily Twitter driven, very heavily TikTok, Insta driven. They think that these people who are mostly young minorities and college age blue hairs that don't vote are representative of the population. That's not real. I mean, that's pretty much it for that analysis. One last thing, I actually started testing this by polling. Like there are all these crazy debates on Twitter that draw these men and women. I've done a lot of this with relationships, just screaming at each other, saying crazy things like never kiss your girlfriend without consent. And I've actually just started taking these questions and just respectfully putting up a bar like, it's important to be a gentleman, guys and ladies. Do you agree with this? And every single time I've asked one of these questions, it's not 50-50. It's like 98-2. No, this person is a lunatic. With like married women commenting, like, guys, don't listen to these crazy feminists. Like, no one wants to hear this at the end of a date. Like, no, this trans woman is not a woman. No, I would think you're a complete punk if you said this about the military as a man. Like, no, it's just 100% no, these people are lunatics.
Right.
The one the other day was someone was like, any man who says he wants his wife to cook him a steak and be quiet, even once, is a sexist, racist. And it was like, I posted this and was like, men and women, would you sometimes just like your partner to be quiet, make you a steak, and then have sex with you? And so far, it's like 95% of the men, like 85% of the women are like, yeah, sometimes. So it's just, this is the real life version of that. Everyone thinks Hamas are a bunch of murdering terrorists. A lot of people, we have this podcast is a pretty good audience by this point. A lot of people out there in the business class need to get off TikTok, go talk to real people, go to a real town, poll actual citizens with actual jobs that actually vote. Look for people with trucks or some shit. There's not really a debate out there in the world.
And to that, AJ, he talked about social media and the Twitterverse not being real. There's another piece you write about it in your book.
Man over bear. That's all I'm going to say. Sorry.
The fact that celebrities think and other people buy into it, that they have this outside influence on you. And it was like, well, I was going to vote for Trump, but then Chuck Schumer's fat cousin told me
Exactly.
told me not to. I mean, but that's not really the case, right?
No, I mean, look, what Will's talking about is, I mean, most of this stuff, whether it's a TikTok video or a tweet, is like going into, the Eagles football stadium and reading what's written on the bathroom wall and thinking that that is the reality of the United States of America. Are you freaking kidding me? No, it isn't. So, I mean, that's the thing, is that it gets radicalized, it gets written, and then it gets there's a force multiplier from Hollywood or tech or academia or the media, but the regular people that are spending an extra $600 a month on food because of Joe Biden, their reality is not some crap that's written on the bathroom wall, right? So that's it. There's a huge cognitive dissonance. There's this huge separation happening there, and that's why we cannot take these people seriously. This is why they have to be. You have to hang jokes on them. You have to put a yoke around their neck. You have to make fun of them, which is why the memes about these people and some of the comedians that are willing to go there, like Chappelle or Gervais or whoever, even Seinfeld recently has gone there. It's good because totalitarianism has arrived when the comedians are scared. And some people have said that, comedians are the first version of history, right? So we have to mock each other relentlessly. It has to be even, try not to be mean about it, but we certainly cannot think that some crap written. I mean, look, some of these newspapers have correspondents that their job is to cherry pick the craziest stuff from the bathroom wall and put it in the Washington Post and put it in the New York Times and put it in the San Francisco Chronicle. That's their job, right? And then you start to think to yourself, wow, this nutty thing is bouncing around inside this half pipe of woke craziness. And I saw it here, and then I saw it repeated on Face the Nation, and this and that. And it must be real. No, there must be, like you just said, you were polling people just random stuff. You know, do you like wearing socks with sandals? You know, whatever the hell it is, right? I mean, look, I used to tell both Monica Crowley and Laura Ingraham, I was their executive producers. I used to say, listen to me, when we're hosting this radio show, when you see that caller board light up, it doesn't necessarily mean what we're saying is brilliant or wonderful. Because if we did a shout out on the radio show, what's your favorite color? The board would light up. So sometimes you could get a false positive. Just because you're getting a million callers doesn't mean what you're saying in that moment is brilliant. It could be dumb as hell. What's your favorite color would light the board up too. So you constantly have to sort of check yourself on those things. So for us to sort of think that we're going to let history of the 21st century written by TikTokers, no way in hell. We have to mock them, have fun doing it. And look, Democrats are involved. I mean, I work with Naomi Wolf. I work with Tulsi Gabbard. I work with RFK Jr. These are all former Democrats. Dershowitz writes books on wokeism, right? So, I mean, I don't think it was any coincidence that 4 of the big politicians last year that were running for president, Trump, DeSantis, Vivek, and RFK, were 4 guys that had sort of decided to push back on some of this craziness, push back on, you know, Trump was obviously the OG from the golden escalator, pushing back on political correctness, right? So he's the OG. I mean, whether it's with Rosie O'Donnell or all of his interviews over the years with Howard Stern, he's always been that guy, right? So, I mean, I grew up, you know, with Trump, listening to Trump on Howard, you know, in the 90s. So, but I think they're make no mistake, most people, I mean, how the hell did DeSantis win Miami-Dade County and Palm Beach County in the governor's race? That means there was a ton of Democrats that said, we are not doing this. Tim and Jim are not going in my daughter's locker room. Okay? So you can believe the hype about don't say gay and all this other stuff, you know, the buzzwords from the bathroom wall. But for the most part, it's between the 40-yard lines. Most of us are saying, whether we have a D or an R next to our name, and we don't want this. We just want to like have our kids be normal and like, you know, I mean, and we're not like uptight, you know. I mean, look, Marvel's learning. Marvel's going to put out a Deadpool movie this summer where every other word's going to be the F word. So Disney's putting out an R-rated Marvel movie. Okay, all right. Now, should little kids go see it? Probably not. But, you know, we can still be entertained and have fun and not make every single thing the Benetton ad, the sushi menu from woke hell, where we're just checking boxes, you know?
Well, yeah, I mean, Deadpool's a bisexual feminist superhero. He's just not marketed to kids. That's the whole point. All the guy does is kill people. Yeah. It's you just have to know your audience. Like I used to read the Deadpool comics, but I'm not 8. So yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
Chrissy, they made a point about in 2 different ways, social media, celebrity, and everything, about what you hear. He talked about what might light up the calls doesn't necessarily portend what you believe, that what you're saying is brilliant. And I think it's hard to do, but that's why I'm kind of trying to find in my small way to do so, that at some point, someone needs to try to penetrate a conversation or a dialogue with regular people. People kind of do it when they run for office, but in general, the average guy we're talking about with the blue collar job, working in a factory, Uber driver, whatever the case may be, maybe a driver because he's in the car, But for the most part, they're not watching cable news and they're not reading the Washington Post. So they only hear what the local news says, what the people talk about at work, and that's about it. So it's good in the sense that they're less likely to be indoctrinated by it because they're not hearing it on a regular basis. But they also don't see how bad the problem is. I don't know if you all have seen clips. I was doing I did the thing in Chicago with the education thing. So I'm sitting in this room with all these Black people in the inner city talking education. And I was hoping it would go this way, but you don't even know what people are going to say. It's not like I knew the people who were coming. And so we're talking education. And to a person, we didn't really bring up what their political ideology was. It's just, what do you think is the problem? How do you solve the problem? And every one of them was saying, we don't want standards to be lowered in our schools. We have a problem with the way our kids are being taught, and they seem to be lowering the standards. And they said that they want their local neighborhood schools to be improved so they can walk their kids to the school 3 blocks away. They don't want to go way out to the other side of school to get a quality education. And I mentioned that because I've mentioned on the show before that I was called in my second meeting on the CEC here in New York a racist by the white liberals on the council because they wanted to keep a lottery and not use a test to get admission to the selective enrollment schools because that was racist because the Black kids didn't score as high. And so I just said, well, why don't we fix their schools so they can score better when they get to middle school? You don't care about where Black kids go to school. Come to find out, that's what all the Black people said. I don't want to go to that school. I want you to fix my school. But if we allow them, and unfortunately in the area that I live, they get to speak on behalf because they are the majority. And, the Black people who do live here aren't really that active. So what you get is a lot of white liberals saying, this is what Black kids need. This is what Black parents want. And no one's there to say it's not true. So the same will go for other political issues. Like you go into the community, even immigrant communities, and they hate what's happening at the border, right? Especially if they came here legally, right? So the immigrants don't like illegal immigration. The Blacks don't like illegal immigration. Yet the Democrat Party, which most minorities tend to vote for, are saying this is who we are as a country and this is what our people want, and nobody's saying anything. So, Christy, is it that no one's really explaining this to them in a way that they get it? Or do they not know? Or will they come out in November and vote against it and we just don't know? What do you think about the disconnect between what regular people think about these issues, the trans issue, about, the economy, as he mentioned, and how expensive things are, immigration, crime, all these things? We know what we think they think, but what they think versus what the Democrats are telling us they think.
I think you're seeing the people in leadership. So the Black faces in leadership or the brown faces in leadership saying, no, this is who we are and everything's fine. There's nothing to see. But we've seen people in Chicago turning up, like Black people turning up, MAGA hats on, irate, saying, no, we're with Trump. Now, in large numbers, are we going to do that? I don't know. I have a Democrat father who he's never been for immigration. He's upset. I mean, they're, on a fixed income, so they're upset about, the price of the economy, but he hates Trump. So
here's the question. Can he sit home? I don't understand why people don't understand that. Like, you don't have to say, what, I hate Trump, I'm voting for Biden. Like the lieutenant governor of Georgia, that's insane. Just don't vote for, just say, if he were to say, I don't think you should vote for Trump and I'm a Republican, I'd be okay with that. Whatever, you don't like Trump, you don't like Trump. But to endorse Biden?
Their hate for Trump makes them say, oh, Joe's not that bad, or he'll turn it around. Now, do I think my dad is the outlier? I hope so. I hope so. I hope people, I say it's the economy. We have to drill down on the economy because it's hurting, most people in one way or another. It's either hurting you or it's pissing you off one way or the other. We don't even do fast food anymore because I'm not paying $18 for, a crappy meal at McDonald's. We're not doing it, right? So either we need to drill down on the economy, but is it enough? I don't know. I think we're going to see. I hope so.
What do you think is going to happen in the election, AJ?
Well, let me give you an example of Michigan. I'm not sure, the experts, the political experts that we all see and read, they're really afraid that Michigan is filled with all these Jew hunters that are looking to turn on Biden and hunt, and the whole place is like, some kind of, caliphate, and they're very upset about Biden's, Israel policy. When in reality, when Biden loses Michigan, it's not going to be because Hamas is there voting. It's going to be because of these electric vehicles and some of the stuff that they are doing in this country to these smokestack workers. Okay, whether you're a longshoreman in Massachusetts, whether you're a lumberjack in the Mountain West, wherever you are, right? Their economic plan is basically manifest destiny of learn to code. It is learn to code. Okay, so if you're an oyster shucker in Louisiana, if you're in the coal, corn, cattle, they're coming for you. They're coming for you. They don't care. They do not care.
So do you say at the end that Trump wins?
I think absolutely. I mean, look. I mean, if Biden is reelected, there's going to be a marriage of two things. The consent of the governed is going to completely vanish. It's going to have a baby with the suspension of disbelief, because people do not believe in this. We're talking regular grandmothers. We're reaching that point. Look, the consent of the governed is what keeps me and Will from going into CVS and just taking the place out and just hopping behind the counter. Like, there's the law of the jungle is where we are heading. If you start to get to a point where we don't believe anything, we don't believe in elections, we don't, the vaccine stuff, the lockdowns, January 6th, some of the most controversial stuff is trust the science. Trust the science of the phony trans science. Trust the science of the phony climate change science. Trust the science of the mRNA vaccine. Just trust us. What is happening here is a breakdown. And there's only, it's death by 1,000 cuts, I guess. There's only so much of this left, I think, with regular folks. So, if the reanimated president is reelected, I mean, people are, I don't know what they're going to do, but it's a travesty. I think Trump can do this. And it's not because, look, if you look at the data from 2016, Trump gained in most demographics, except
the white guys.
That's right, the pumpkin spice mafia, the soy boys. So the soy boys, love is love, hug, vaccinate your cat. Those people, he lost with them, but he is gaining with all the white adjacent. So as we gain with the white adjacent, and the Hispanics, it's funny, there's the old joke about, hey, look, I don't think it's smart to import. If you're a Democrat, I don't think the game plan was, oh, wait a minute, blacks are moving up into the middle class. They may leave the plantation soon. They may discover who Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell and Shelby Steele and Wilfred Riley and Charles Love are. They may discover who these people are. So we need to replace them with something. I know. Let's import millions
Catholic males.
Let's import millions of Catholic conservative people escaping a Marxist dump.
We're running out of time, but I gotta say, you're the only other person to say that. I said that for years, and all the conservatives would look at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, they're not gonna vote for the left forever.
No, right. I mean, how's that working out in the Rio Grande Valley counties that Trump flipped? Okay, these are blue places. So, look, they don't want to mess with they don't want to deal with cartels. I mean, it's just an amazing thing.
So you say Trump will win. Well, let's end on this. Why don't you tell the people about your PR company?
Well, no one yet on this show today has ever hired me, so I'm kind of pissed off. Okay, I've been building the sort of conservative Marvel Cinematic Universe over here, where I get to be Nick Fury, right? I got to get eye patch. I'm just trying to build it out. Look, Publius PR is a place for dissidents. There's all different types of dissidents. people that, don't want to just sort of swallow the Kool-Aid and row with the herd mentality. I started off, like I said earlier, as a producer of shows. I worked on Capitol Hill for a little while for a Republican congressman. But I was the executive producer of the Laura Ingraham Show, Monica Crowley. I did a show for John Solomon. I helped launch the Blaze Radio Network for Glenn Beck. I worked with Buck Sexton, Chris Salcedo.
That's how you got all the liberty loving Latino. That's how you got all.
That's my brother. That's my brother. He gave me a blurb for the book.
I saw them all. Yeah, I'm like, I think he got a blurb from every conservative that the left hates.
That's right. I had to tell people to go away. I told Bongino and Shapiro and some others. Ben Shapiro used to be my lawyer when we all worked together at for Talk Radio Network.
AJ Will's got to go home.
Well, look, here's the deal. If you have a book, we work with all the major publishers. Will, we work with Broadside over there, Teresa over there. We work with pretty much every conservative imprint. Some are willing to take more risks than others. That's okay. We just had a New York Times bestseller this week with Tulsi Gabbard's book, but we don't just do books. We do conservative groups. We work with campaigns. We work with super PACs. The core of the conservative movement, everyone from Gun Owners of America to the Federalist Society. We put people on shows, radio, TV, print, and we try to have some fun along the way and slowly, incrementally make the United States of America a little more sane and a little more fun.
Well, you're gonna have to hear. I don't know. Okay. Will's too important for you now, but Christy and I we'll have to reach out and.
All right, Will.
I'm
sure Jr., but I'll be in touch. Will. Okay.
But it's been great having you. He's AJ Rye, CEO of Publius PR and the author of The Walking Dead and the upcoming. I tried to show it. It's too bright, but the White Privilege album. AJ, thanks for coming on.
Thank you, guys. Look, you're all patriots. It's a pleasure to be here, and I will be in touch for sure. God bless the US of A, land of the free and a home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving a day.